Welcome back, everyone, to Web3 Unpacked. I'm Rich Pasqua, and joining us today is Chris Bradbury, CEO of Summerfy, a decentralized finance platform that allows you to power up your portfolio by borrowing, lending, and multiplying your favorite assets. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, Rich. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And Chris, just a little bit about you. You're predominantly from a product management background, which is pretty cool. Yep. That's where I come from. And you also have a little bit of a background in computer or software engineering as well, which is a nice complement to the whole product end of it. As I mentioned,
absolutely, yeah.
I come from product, and it's nice to have someone in Web3 that can see multiple angles of a problem or, a product, I should say. So very cool. Okay, so before we get in, we like to do something, Chris, where we ask our guests kind of how did your Web3 journey start for you?
Yeah, so I joined, it started for me back in MakerDAO. I joined Maker back in mid 2018. So like I said, I was a product manager prior as a background and so on. So I was a product in fintech, in growth and startup companies. And yeah, I spoke to some of the people, the head of product at Maker at the time, Søren, kind of found out what they were building, and yeah, kind of was fascinated really by the concept of what Maker were doing. Both in how it could change and revolutionize like finance and so on, and how like the borrowing against assets on chain and minting this fresh new asset DAI single collateral DAI at the time was done, but also on the decentralized governance aspect as well. So yeah, I think after one conversation with Søren, I was kind of just blown away because I didn't know too much about it. Prior to speaking to them, a good friend of mine, Henry, who was head of design at Maker at the time, got me the conversation, asked me to speak with them and so on, and yeah, just blown away. And then, to be honest, like that almost looks tiny now compared to where we've come to today. But pretty much been blown away every week in crypto.
Yeah, it's moving fast. And I always like to hear people's like yourself, your story, because you shine a light on that aha moment, and you just explained it perfectly. Like, oh my gosh, you can actually do this in a trustless environment. It's really powerful, and it hits you like a ton of bricks. And then from there, it's just, full steam ahead for most people, or either you get scared off, you just don't understand it, or you jump in head first. So, very, very cool. And it's one of those weird things for guys like you and I, you'll always remember like your first concert or, a big event that happens in the world. You remember where you are. You remember what you were saying and what you were doing. And it's kind of really, really cool because it is profound. Now, before we get in, I'm sorry, go ahead. What?
No, just agreeing. Yeah, just saying indeed. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And before we get into kind of the nuts and bolts of Summerfy, which, we're excited to do here, can you just give us the high level kind of elevator pitch for Summerfy?
So I think you summed it up quite nice at the beginning, but we're building effectively the best place to borrow and earn in DeFi. So Summerfy is not a protocol. It's just a UI interface, a user interface, enabling you to access the kind of what we believe is the best DeFi protocols available on Ethereum and like Optimism, Arbitrum, and Base. With that, we allow you to, like some of the protocols that we support, like Maker, Spark, Archna, Aave, Morpho, and so on. And you can, from a borrowing point of view, you can deposit your assets that you already hold, borrow against them in any kind of supported token that we have. We try not to describe ourselves as an aggregator of having everything under the sun, every protocol, every token on Summerfy. It really is a curated experience of the best protocols. So like kind of you can trust us in a way. yeah, we've been like, we were the front end for Maker originally, is how it all started out in 2019. And today, yeah, we cover a load of DeFi across multiple chains, and have almost $5 billion of collateral being managed through the Summerfy interface on those protocols. On top of that, we have a range of like really advanced, entirely non-custodial automation tools as well. So you can set up advanced orders like stop loss trading, stop losses, auto buys or auto sells, and more recently an automated take profit one that I think we all wish we had in 2021 to kind of take the emotion out of selling when the markets were rallying upwards. So now we have an automation for it that you can set up when you're kind of in a more stable peace of mind, and set your parameters and let the kind of the bots just do it for you. But yeah, it's basically a 10x experience on top of the protocol UIs to make interacting and using DeFi easier.
Fantastic. I mean, you packed a lot in there, and we're going to kind of unpack it, obviously, as we talk. But you said something really important, Chris, and I think it's important for people who are developing in the Web3 space to understand that, you know, you're selective about the change you're supporting on your application, because you don't want to, have the floodgates open, and then you on your developer side and product management side are managing all of that. And it's better to do fewer things really well than try and do everything at once, or boil the ocean, as I say.
Yeah. 100%. So
that's really cool.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So kudos. That's a really, really good approach, a responsible approach, I should say, to product development. And you also mentioned, bots and trading and 10xing on investments. That I definitely want to get into because that's really interesting. And you also brought up a few times MakerDAO. What now? You mentioned that you worked with them in the past, and obviously that helped. That was the impetus to kind of spark your imagination and kind of run free in the Web3 space. What's that relationship like? And, how did you start that?
Yeah. So in reality, the project that Summerfy is today started in that 2018 journey of joining MakerDAO. So Summerfy, we used to be called Oasis.app, and that just as a rebrand of basically the same product. But that started in the Maker Foundation, kind of as part of MakerDAO. When Maker launched multi-collateral DAI in November 2019, they wanted to launch it on its own kind of brand. Well, the UI on its own kind of brand and domain, and so on. Back in Maker, we had a DEX, effectively the first decentralized exchange on mainnet, which was Oasis DEX, called Simple Market when it was very first released. But we had this brand called Oasis DEX back in the day, and when we needed a brand that was trusted by the Maker community, known by the Maker community, and so on, because in reality the DeFi community was fairly small in 2018, 2019 kind of time when all this was being put into action. So yeah, the very first version we launched, calling it Oasis.app. It had borrow, trade, and save as three kind of distinct apps within the single app in a way. So Oasis.app was an app of apps back then. And yeah, I mean, Oasis Borrow was just the borrow side of Maker. Oasis Save was the DAI savings rate, where you could just access the DAI savings rate incredibly easily. And Oasis Trade was the new version of the Oasis DEX UI. But yeah, so the app originally was just the user interface to Maker, exposing very simple functionality and really just exposing the contract functions, simplified a little bit through proxies and so on. But in June 2021, when the Maker Foundation dissolved and the protocol was handed over to the community, there was a number of like kind of creations within inside the foundation that basically got moved into separate entities. Oasis.app was one of those things, so it moved out into its own separate entity, and we continued to build features on top of the Maker protocol, things we weren't really allowed to do when we were in the foundation, but now we could kind of spread our wings a little bit more, add some new functionality, integrate with some other parts of DeFi, and so on. And then really the long-term kind of vision really was not just to be a Maker front end, but actually to be a DeFi front end. And again, we talked about it before, but a curated DeFi front end. We want to be able to create that 10x user experience. I think you referred to it as 10x investment just before, but just want to clarify a 10x user experience improvement that we're aiming for. If people can make 10x on their investments, then that's also amazing. But yeah, 10x
No promises.
10x improvement on the UX. Exactly, yeah. And really the only way to be able to do that is to spend quite a lot of time and focus actually building the relevant features and the things you need on top of these like really quite complex protocols under the hood, and so on. And what we try to do is make the same experience for all users across the 5 protocols that we support, regardless of what network you're on, and just to make it easier. And then in July of 2023, as we kind of fully stepped into this kind of curated DeFi experience, we still had a huge association with Maker. So we rebranded away from Oasis.app that was very much connected with Maker, and kind of like really set ourselves free from that. And that's when we rebranded to Summerfy, and in some ways kind of tried to like let go of all of our Maker connections, and so on. But there are still multiple people in the team, myself included, that have been there and been involved in Maker since 2018, 2019, and are kind of still kind of like Maker OGs. In that sense, so it still feels there's still a very strong connection to Maker inside the team. Maker is still, I think, the most popular product we have from all the users that we had from being the official kind of Maker or default Maker front end back in the day. But yeah, all the other protocols combined make up more now than the Maker does. But Maker is still the single biggest protocol supported on Summerfy, which is kind of really pleasing to see. And still pleasing to see DAI doing so well. Yeah,
that's great. And again, a lot of information, a lot of details packed in there. Yeah. But a couple of things stand out to me, Chris, and being a product person myself and a bit of a UX nerd and a designer myself, the idea of, obviously multiple chains, which we'll get into a little more later, but the idea of keeping a consistent experience for users, I think, is, it's table stakes for you and I, but a lot of people ignore it and they switch things up and they do whatever. And that's part of the confusing part of crypto in general for a lot of people is, well, I'm using this chain with this wallet with this, getting this experience here, and it's something different here. And I think it's hyper important that people developing for Web3 blockchain protocols and applications, they do keep their own experience consistent between chains and, say, denominations or whatever you're trading, coins, tokens, staking.
Yeah.
But it's the linchpin. It's the key for everything in Web3, meaning we need more road signs, right? So
yes.
Web 1, Web 2, 2.5, whatever you want to call them, it took many, many years to establish those road signs. Like, oh, that's just a exit or an on-ramp or an off-ramp or whatever it may be. So hearing folks like yourself paying a lot of attention to that, it means a lot to me and the community. So thanks. And it's hyper important. So, and the whole MakerDAO relationship is really cool to see. And another thing that I bring up a lot too is, one protocol helping another protocol or dApp, and being very supportive. And that's the beautiful part of Web3 to me, is that it is truly a global community, Very cool. Yeah. Now, talking about user experience, who is your predominant? I know you're pretty much opening up to anyone, but who's your predominant audience?
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I think the DeFi. I mean, when you get to like kind of DeFi is obviously a bit of a niche of crypto. Crypto's a niche anyway in the world, and so on. And then the borrowing and lending side of DeFi is kind of a further niche again. Like the experience we have on Summerfy, like we do a lot on the UX side, but it is very difficult to escape the fact that actually our core target kind of audience and the most common user we really have, what we describe them internally as is like a semi-sophisticated crypto enthusiast. So someone that really kind of like like it's not a newcomer to crypto. Like we all know that kind of as a brand new user to crypto, Summerfy probably isn't the place to get started for the very first time and so on. Like you have to have a non-custodial wallet. You have to already have the assets that you want to do things with in that wallet, and ultimately as well, you have to kind of try and understand some of the terminology, because all of it, everything on the app and so on does carry some risk. And so on, and you have to understand some of those risks to understand which kind of products that you want to go into and so on, and also how you want to set some of those products up. So it is for this kind of like more on mainnet, especially a more wealthier user. L2s, it's open to almost anyone from a financial standpoint, because it's such cheap gas fees and so on. But yeah, you're setting up things like loan to values. You have to understand like the maximum like liquidation ratios, what liquidations mean, what happens during a liquidation generally. So yeah, you definitely need some sophistication within kind of DeFi, within crypto, to understand how that is. And again, you do need to understand like how to manage your own keys. Like know the basics, because if you're using some of these apps like this, you're potentially putting a lot of your wealth like kind of to work and so on, and the rewards can be great, but if you get things wrong, the risks like the risk is high if you store your keys incorrectly, or you just drag the slider all the way to the right during a market drop. Like if you're like trying to buy the dip or something like that. So yeah, like we know we're not going after kind of your average Joe on the street with the current app how it is today. We never set out to kind of to do that. Like we had a target user at the time, and that target user remains the same as it is today. But yeah, it's someone that knows kind of what they're doing and there's some experience. And really what we try and do is we try and target users that are already using the underlying protocols. If you look at like kind of the Aves, the Sparks, the Morphos and so on, and say, hey, if you're using that protocol, actually you can use Summer and improve, like get a load of added features onto that, and actually hopefully reduce your risk with some of the features that we've got as well, and the ways we display some information.
Yeah, all good points, Chris. And yeah, it's important because it's not we're not buying and flipping NFTs here. We're staking, we're putting generally a fairly good amount of funds up and assets up to be manipulated by you. And it's one of those things. Be careful what you wish for in the world of finance, because if you don't trust banks, well, that's fine. But if you take it into your own hands, get educated before you start dipping your toes into this. And with that said, and with the spirit of good user experience and UI, do you help educate along the way? Meaning little info buttons or pop-ups that maybe give you a warning or just guide the user.
We definitely have like the kind of information tooltips and so on to help kind of like almost like glossary or like a definition of what the terms mean and so on. And we have the warnings like we do explain things, like trying to explain things in real terms. So if you have like you set your LTV and you're only like it's like 4.3% away from the liquidation LTV, we actually tell you what the price will drop. If the price drops to this is when you'll be liquidated and so on. But then again, we have to be conscious that we are not trying to onboard people with no experience or little understanding. Like we have designed it in such a way that it is for like kind of semi-sophisticated users to make like to try and optimize their assets while protecting themselves from losses and so on. But to do that, you have to be a little bit more sophisticated and so on. In the same way that, if like they don't design Formula One cars and so on for the average person to jump in and so on, right? So it's like I don't want to gloss over and say it's super easy for anyone to get started. But if you are familiar with how DeFi works, then it is one of the easiest places to interact with DeFi. If you have that basic level of understanding, and it does only require the very basic level. Really of how borrowing and lending works in DeFi. And if you have that understanding, then all the extra tooltips, the warning boxes and the way we kind of frame our data and the data hierarchy makes total sense to you. But I think, if I just took my mum, for example, put her in front of the screen and said, hey, can you like get me like 2.5x exposure to ETH? She'd just be like, what?
What?
So,
What
yeah, exactly. So, well, we have to, I think one of the hardest parts of like, and you'll know this as well, but one of the hardest parts sometimes from a product management point of view is to say, hey, like build for your user, build for the user you are targeting, and so on. Because if you try and build for everybody, you're ultimately going to build for nobody. So if you try and make potentially like the way in as simple as possible for others, and get rid of the details that actually the more like sophisticated users want to see and want to use, then you'll just like, but it's then too hard for them to actually use once they've got started. They will just leave, and the ones that you hope to get in to maybe see those features will never have gotten in the first place because you've maybe simplified the flow so much that you've abstracted away probably any confidence in them that they're going to be able to do what they want to do when they get in.
Yeah, or additional details or depth that they may want to go into that, if it's too simplified. Yeah, really, really good points. And again, it's like, it's that, you said it perfectly, you can't really design for everyone or you'll be designing for no one. So it's good. You guys are staying in your lane. You know who you're going after and their skill levels, if I may say. But it's also important for everyone, our audience and everyone developing. You're developing software basically, and at the end of the day, you can manipulate and change that over time, and it will become simplified. And perhaps you can have, like a lot of software out there now, you can have modes, professional mode or beginner modes or whatever it may be. And the beginner modes may have more tutorials and or step-by-steps. The pro version may just be very, very detailed. But that's really cool. Go ahead.
No, so, I was say, and that is our plan over the next 6 months. Ultimately, like to actually enable like much newer users, like more first time users to enter the earn side of the product, and actually, just like you said, move most of the features that we have at the moment, like kind of segregate them out into a more pro like part of the app, and so on, and actually say, hey, like we're getting to a point in DeFi now where we're starting now to be able to probably position ourselves as an industry to say, hey, we're actually opening our doors maybe now to the much larger audience that is out there, and now it's important that we build some products that they can come in and actually use. And so on. So I completely agree, and exactly kind of what we're doing, because we believe now is the time is right. Like I think 3 years ago there was a lot of hope that we could onboard 1 billion people, and so on. Like we're never going to onboard 1 billion people still now, but we can maybe onboard the next maybe 10 million people over the next 12 months, for example. Because the hard reality is there's less than 2 million people or 2 million active wallets in DeFi. At the moment, or even like kind of on chain, on the main like Ethereum chain and so on. So we need to kind of have sensible numbers to grow and target towards, and make sure that we're targeting those users.
Awesome. Again, a very responsible approach to developing a product, which is good. You're not pleasing everyone, but you're pleasing the right crowd right now, and you're going to open it up. That's fantastic. So now, Chris, with the, obviously everything, really always starts in kind of like the finance world, right? So DeFi and even TradFi products, products out there start with some kind of financial component, and borrowing, lending, staking is hot right now, right? It has been for a while, but I think it's really, really picking up steam with products like Summerfy and others. How does Summerfy differentiate itself from the competitors? How are you guys different?
Yeah, so I think I get in some ways, like the protocols we support, like their own protocol front ends are kind of in some ways our competitors, but obviously we work very closely with the protocols that we support. But again, like we're really trying to add that 10x user experience on top of the main protocol. So as I said before, Summerfy is not a protocol in itself. Really, we're just a set of kind of like proxy contracts that enable features to be built on top of the underlying protocol. So protocols like MorphoBlue, they talk a lot about their code base being less than 600 lines of code. like that is when we can then come in and add these proxy layers on top, and this functionality on top to be able to do a load of things on Morpho Blue that you can't just do if you just interact with the protocol, kind of just direct into the protocol and so on. So where we try and stand out is we try and say, hey, we can allow you to do one transaction actions, whereas if you interacted with the protocol directly, it would take you maybe 5 or 6 transactions to do. So if you want to go 3x on ETH USDC, for example, if you want to interact with the protocol directly, you've got to you'll lock your ETH and you borrow USDC in one transaction. You'll then go to like Uniswap or 1inch or somewhere, swap that USDC back to ETH. You'll go back to Morpho, deposit that ETH and borrow more USDC, and you'll maybe do that 2 or 3 times and so on. With Summerfy, you will choose the ETH you want to deposit. You will choose the multiple exposure you want to get to, for example, and you will click a transaction. It will use flash loans and so on, and it will do all of that for you in a single transaction, giving you a vault in the end state that you selected at the very start. Same things with like automation and so on as well. Like you obviously cannot just randomly add automation to your vaults on any of the kind of protocol front ends or like Aave, Morpho, Maker, Spark, or anything like that. So we have this automation layer. Again, it's entirely non-custodial, so you're not giving up custody of your assets. Only you can like enable it. Only you can disable it. Only you can change it. The way this contracts are written, it can only fire when kind of like the conditions that you've set are met on chain in a verified and transparent way. And like, for instance, StopLoss is the most popular product we have. It's kind of a no-brainer for like 99% of users, because if you have a position, let's say at 60% LTV, the liquidation price might be at like 78 or 78% LTV or liquidation point rather than price. But if you get liquidated by the protocol, you often pay a penalty of somewhere between like kind of 5 or 15%, depending on the protocol. And that's pretty hard. But not only that, but you've also had to wait for the price to get all the way down to that point. So if there's a huge price drop in the middle of the night or something like that, or you're flying on a plane or something and you don't have your keys with you, you can't use your keys when you're on the plane or something, there is nothing you can do. We kind of saw that happen in 2020 during Black Thursday and COVID. We kind of saw it happen in 2022 at the end of May, early June 22, when Luna Terra collapsed and so on. Like a third of the world was asleep, pretty much, in both those events when they started, and so on. The price of crypto lost a huge amount. The network was clogged up. People were like couldn't understand how to like kind of like free their wallets from like pending transactions and so on in the old gas methods and so on. But now with our automation and so on, you can set these things like stop loss. If you've got a 60% LTV position, you can set your stop loss at 65%, for example. So you know when you go to sleep tonight, if the price drops by like 4%, these bots will automatically close out your position to either collateral or the debt asset like DAI or USDC, whichever you've chosen, and it will just do it for you. So it's extremely kind of like stress-free in some ways. Like if you know the market's kind of a little bit bumpy and you're like, got to get some sleep and so on, actually you can actually go get some sleep, because you know, like, worst case, if it drops by $300, it's just going to close me out and I'm going to be happy in the morning. And so on. So these are the sorts of features to say like, hey, like you need to use Summerfy in order to get some of these features on top of these protocols and so on. I think we have the most advanced automation tools available out there. And like I said, it's still entirely non-custodial. So if it feels like you're giving up control of your assets and so on, then you're not at all. It is only you that can still access these assets, and everything on Summerfy is entirely non-custodial. As well. So you're never handing over control or your keys or anything like that to anyone else. That's all on there.
Awesome. Yeah. And some of these features you would think are just, table stakes, like, bare bones, you need these, but a lot of these applications and protocols do not offer a lot of these things. And I think that's a huge differentiator in the world of personal finance and manipulating and staking and lending and everything else that goes with it. Now, Chris, you brought up a few times automation, right?
Yep.
There's your standard like watch the markets, put calls in, sell, buy, whatever you want. Are you guys implementing kind of any kind of AI solutions for the platform?
No. No, not at the moment. No, I mean, at the moment it is, again, because it's all very non-custodial. Like you set very explicit parameters that can be verified on chain. So if you say, hey, if the LTV of a position hits 65%, auto de-risk me back to 60%, for example. So with oracles and so on chain, the contracts, like they have to be able to read the oracle prices on chain. The current price and so on, that will give you an LTV. If that LTV exceeds that price, checked within the kind of smart contract and so on, then it will allow it to close. So yeah, we don't have any advanced kind of like buying or selling methodologies like using UI or anything AI or anything like that at the moment. They are in some ways fairly simple like that, but ultimately that's in order to maintain the non-custodial nature and self-custody of your assets. Because if we're to hand, the difficulty is if you start handing that over to AI, you're effectively giving custody out, giving custody away of your assets to a third party. Although you might be giving it to an AI bot and so on. Like that AI bot would obviously, like their learning models and so on. It's going to learn, it's going to adjust, but also more than likely there's going to be engineers that can adjust those models as well to potentially do something that you wouldn't want to happen with your assets. So I know there's tools, there's AI trading bots and so on out there that will do a really good job on trading exchanges. Like we are not a trading interface.
Right.
Like we're not going after like users looking for short-term gains or like kind of like trading by minute charts or anything like that. Definitely it's like longer term users, like generally our positions are open for like months at a time on Summerfy. We do have users that open and close very, very quickly sometimes, but the large majority of the users are kind of long-term users. With kind of like the most you can get is like 5x on volatile assets. So this isn't a kind of quick win. It's not designed to be a quick win game within Summerfy. And yeah, the AI trading bots. So again, when we talk about designing and building products for the user at the right time, that is, it's a cool thing, but for some other product.
And it's Chris, it's kind of refreshing to hear that, like, hey, we're not sandwiching in AI into our product, because it seems like everyone is trying to do that. There is a time and a place, and a service that AI can provide to the right product. And if it's not right and it doesn't make sense, why do it? Some other protocols I've talked to don't implement it into their product directly, but they use it for training. They use it for education. They use it for a sundry of different uses outside of trading and or lending and everything else. So that's good. That's actually a good thing. You don't want to force fit, and we know what happens in the product world when you do that. Just to take a little bit of a step back and say, in the grand scheme of things, why do you feel permissionless finance protocols or applications like Summerfy are important to everyday people or institutions and markets?
Yeah. So I think the permissionless nature of the blockchain is incredibly important for how it works, how it reacts, like how the governance works on these underlying protocols and so on. I mean, I think the transparency of the blockchain just in general, the fact you have this like transparent ledger, you have tools like Dune or the Graph and so on that can rebuild the entire history in a user friendly and like way and so on. I actually don't know if each individual user accessing it permissionally is necessarily like the way we need to go for every user in the future for this to be kind of like widely adopted and successful and so on. In the same way as I don't think when we succeed in onboarding the next 100 million users or whatever, do they even need to know that they're using crypto? Like I would say definitely not. Like that's if we probably haven't done a good job of abstracting away the technology layer. If the 100 million people are using DeFi, for example, and know they're using DeFi. I think the technology it brings us is hugely powerful for a number of reasons, but predominantly it's the trust and the operations of the underlying protocols. So those users can trust the apps that they're using that are allowing them to earn money or trade or anything using the underlying apps, the underlying protocols themselves. So these users will need to trust the apps and so on. But hopefully they will know that now they're using this new transparent like financial system that on top with all of the technology of the blockchain and the permissionless nature of it is 1,000 times better and more secure and more trusted through a trustless nature than what we have today in a kind of ordinary banking sector. But I don't think ordinary users need to know that they're using a permissionless blockchain, and I don't think most users will actually have a permissionless wallet. They may have an abstracted away permissionless wallet and so on, but I still think the underlying apps that you're accessing it through, because I mean, 100 million people are not going to be accessing protocol user interfaces or even interfaces like Summer. I don't think in a couple of years' time they're going to be accessing all of this through the apps they currently use today, more than likely, where their money already is, and they don't need to know necessarily about the kind of non-custodial nature of their money because they've already deposited it probably into a custodian to be able to access all this stuff anyway.
Yeah, well said. And trustless blockchain was created, or cryptography was created, because human intermediaries cannot be trusted, right? Yeah. So point blank right there. But you also shined a light on a bigger idea, which it permeates the whole product world as well, is, when the technology, I think Steve Jobs actually said this, where when the technology disappears, that's when you're successful, right? Yes. And the product is doing its job. And I completely agree. You asked 99% of the population on planet Earth if they know about or care about blockchain or permissionless digital tools, they'll say, I really don't care. I don't care as long as it gets me from point A to point B. And that's the goal, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
And okay, good. Yeah. And, it's a process in Web3, and we're all going to get there at some point where it's just the web. It's just a tool. You don't know how you don't. Yep. So we talked about some of the protocols or the networks that you support, automation. There's so much that goes into Summerfy for sure. Now, again, a little bit dipping on the user experience end of it, because I know that's a big deal for you guys, and I'm happy to hear that. What can users expect? What kind of dashboard? What kind of analytics or tools am I going to have at my fingertips?
So mainly it's the ones we talked about already. It's the one transaction or kind of the one-click transactions to be able to do kind of like multiple things in one transaction, like get from point A to point B in one transaction, which is very difficult to do anywhere else. It's the automation tools, but it's also the data that we surface as well. We do a lot of kind of data transformation within the UI, kind of on the back end and so on, to make sure that we present to you data that's actually useful for you to make a decision. So we show you profit and loss net profit and loss calculations, either in the debt token or the collateral token or in USD if it's in neither of those. For example, to try and help you make the best decisions, we use the jobs to be done framework ultimately internally, and like the core job that we're trying to solve with this UI is help me optimize my assets while protect me from losses. And hopefully with all of those things we've talked about today, like you can see where kind of what bits of those kind of fit into the optimization aspect, from that the UI, the one clicks and so on, and getting from point A to point B in a transaction state there, and then the protect from losses, particularly with automation and so on, but also just the one click close buttons. Like we talked about kind of Black Thursday in 2020 and like late May, early June 22 with Lunar Terror and so on. But one of the in 22 we had this one click close button, which means that you can just close out any debt position you have without needing to go and get the amount of debt to repay first. You can just click close, and it will use the excess collateral in your vault to close your position and just give you back whatever net value you had in that vault. And I mean, it led to Summerfy losing a lot of users because a lot of people closed their positions. But actually, we would much rather users close their positions and leave with something like, say, a profit, maybe even at the time, because it was on the back of a huge bull run in 2022, like the 21-22 bull run. instead of users being liquidated and left with nothing, basically. So from a user point of view, like it's a much easier way to access DeFi, to manage DeFi, to also get out of DeFi if you need to, on some of them than the underlying like kind of front ends, for example.
Yeah, it seems like you're building in a lot of, little details that give the end user who's could be pushing around tons of money, that extra security or feel good feeling, if you will. So that's really good that you're paying attention to those little details. And, about, finance and, different networks. And we've seen so many networks like Terra. You brought up Terra a few times. You'd have to be living under a rock not to understand or have been impacted by that event. How, and this is, again, goes back to product, brand, communications. In that world, how are you making people feel good or secure? I know you brought up some of those tools, which I really like, actually. Getting out quick, not having to wait, the keys, everything that goes with that those are really big. But how are you making people feel comfortable? If you've lived through Terra, you've definitely skittish.
So I think that's where we've got the curated experience comes in a little bit. There is only top tier DeFi protocols available on Summer, so brand names you kind of know and hopefully trust anyway. As a product, we've also been around, I guess now for 5 years, almost 5 years. Coming up in 5 years now. We had different products in Maker as well before that from this team. So we are probably one of the oldest like front end teams in DeFi in reality with that. And obviously one thing that helps with our kind of trust aspect is the fact that like I said before, we're managing almost $5 billion of users' collateral, or users are managing $5 billion of their collateral through the Summerfy interface on a regular occurrence. And so on. So all of that money has been interacted with in the last 6 months, for example. So it is users like doing all of this stuff through Summer. They are very active. And with that, it's kind of like the age old thing of like, hey, if all these people trust us, then you can trust us too. But ultimately, it's that most of the trust is down to yourself as a user to do the right things at the right time. As well, and we have a kind of like a mantra inside the product team, particularly at Summerfy, and that's like we don't support a product that we wouldn't use ourselves internally. So if there's a product being discussed or someone's asking to onboard their product or something, and there's nobody in the team that would use that product, for example, then it's not going to make it onto the Summerfy interface, for example. So if we wouldn't use it ourselves, then we wouldn't expect our users to use it either. And
that's a great mantra to have, because why sell a product or push a product that you're not going to use or feel secure about, which I think is a good philosophy to adopt. Now Chris, you guys literally just released a program called Raise, right? And it's a rewards program, literally last week, right? So it's fresh, it's new. Can you give us a little bit of an update on that, or a little bit of insight into what users can expect?
Yeah, totally. So it's so Raise is our point system. We launched it last Thursday, and as users of Summerfy, you can now earn Raise or points for managing your position through the Summerfy interface. You can boost the Raise that you are earning by adding things on like automation and so on. You can earn a ton of instant Raise if you do multiply trades, etc. But also we did a retroactive kind of like airdrop of Raise as well to all, not only previous Summerfy users, but even if you have an active wallet on Ethereum, Optimism, Base, or Arbitrum with at least 0.2 ETH in it on June the 18th, and you'd done 5 transactions on that wallet by June the 18th, you'd have also been airdropped Raise. in order to kind of claim those raise, you just have to open a position on Summerfy and keep it open for at least 14 days. And so on. And hopefully in that time as well, you'll experience and understand kind of like the benefits of using Summer, and want to keep it open beyond that. But yeah, we got the raise. You can find all the information at Summer.Fi/raise. And raise really is it's the first step into us launching a new earn protocol ourselves in very early 2025. So we almost go back to that earlier discussion we had around building for the kind of the users and the user groups and that pro interface and so on. And I kind of touched on the idea that we're actually working very hard for the next 6 months, ultimately, to expand our addressable market, to create a product much more for the kind of next 10 million, 100 million users. And that is this new kind of yield aggregation protocol that we're kind of terming at the moment like the Summer Earn protocol, and so on, which will actually be available via a dedicated app on the Summerfy interface. And yeah, it will be the easiest way you can earn in DeFi, in an incredibly passive way.
Yeah, that's great.
Raise is the first step in that.
That's great. And, if you ask credit card users, like their favorite part of having a credit card is the rewards points. And it's probably the only thing really, but that's great because it becomes a retention and an incentive plan for your core users. So, things are a little bit different here in the United States, as you well know, Chris. We have issues with the SEC and regulations and whatnot. How are you guys handling that in the UK? I know that there are fewer chains, that you guys are tied to in the UK. But how do you handle regulations for Summerfy?
Yeah. So at the moment, like we operate in that kind of entirely non-custodial world at the moment. So yeah, I mean, there's very little like kind of to follow really there at the moment. But yeah, we have our own like legal counsel and so on, and we take advice and so on what we can and what we can't do. And yeah, we stay within the lines effectively of knowing what definitely isn't allowed, and what we can do, and ultimately it's sensible things like we block sanctioned countries and so on from the user interface. Obviously, the underlying protocols, anyone anywhere can access those, and so on. And yeah, we like if you interact with sanctioned entities like Tornado Cash and so on, then you'll find your wallet is probably blocked on the Summerfy interface as well. But yeah, so we understand where a number of kind of like lines are, we stay between them, but generally they're kind of like globally shared lines, whether you're UK, US, or whatever.
Good to hear. And we're not so lucky in the United States with some of these regulations, but slowly but surely, I think the U.S. government will get out of its own way and realize that this is the largest technology, the biggest innovation in history, basically, and you can't ignore it. And there are budding communities and or entire industries being built underneath these platforms and products. And that's one thing I always like to bring up. Please recognize that there are human beings building these things, and many of them, and they're not working on websites. They're building products for Web3. So it's important that people recognize the industry, not just the products itself. So awesome. Indeed. And talking about the community a little bit, what does the Summerfy community look like? How is it structured? How do you communicate to them?
Yeah, so our primary communication channels, I think, are mainly Discord, Discord and Twitter, or X, is obviously the prime ones. I think that's the same for most crypto projects. Yeah, that's primarily where we are. Like, obviously, our community is made up mainly of users talking strategies, like different things, different products, and so on, like different returns, like how does like X strategy work, and so on. Again, the community is pretty much the same sort of like in the same sort of bracket as our target user. It's a fairly semi-sophisticated users that understand how like yield loops work, how you can kind of like arbitrage effectively between like the staking rate and the borrow rate. If you like 10x your exposure to those and so on, and you can actually like earn 10% from staking instead of like maybe 3%, but you take on peg risk and so on. So yeah, that's the sort of community. It's a lot of kind of like DeFi OGs. It's a lot of new people getting into DeFi. It's a real mix. But yeah, it's a community full of a lot of knowledge as well, which makes conversations extremely exciting.
Yeah, and that's interesting because a lot of applications, the Discord channels, X channels, is really like one way, right? And when you get a community who are sharing ideas and strategies around investments and staking and lending and all that good stuff, that's really cool because now you're gonna, like you said, there's OGs on there, there's maybe some noobs. You can start to learn from each other, not just the brand itself or the product itself. So that's really good. And it's a really good sign that you're getting cross communication like that, because a lot of it, like I said, it's one way, it's stale, and it's usually just a repository of information that people are dipping into. So thumbs up to that. Now, when in the world of investing, a lot of folks, including myself at points in my career, have been in your situation where you've got a product, you've got an idea, you're forming a team. Now you need to do a raise. What was that experience like for you? And who are you what VCs are you partnering with?
Yeah. So we raised, like when we broke away from the Maker Foundation, we took money from the UDHC, which is kind of the investment arm of the Maker Foundation. They were what they turned into. And so on. So they're a big part of what we're doing here with the connection back then as well. We then raised the Series A in 21 and so on, which was led by Libertas and Road Capital as well, and support, as well as a number of others and some really really amazing angels in that round as well. But yeah, raising is it's a tough thing. There's a lot of projects out there and so on. I'd had experience with it before crypto as well. In previous projects, I'd worked in the fintech world as well, but it's a hard experience, and I think it's easy to see it seems like a lot of projects are raising at all times and so on, but there's a lot of projects out there, just generally. But aside from the raising though, you have fantastic conversations, you get a lot of feedback, and so on, and it's just important to listen to all of that feedback and take it on board. Because you're not always right. I think that's the key thing. As a founder, let's say, a lot of time, particularly in DeFi, when a lot of these investors are users in DeFi, you can in some ways treat some of the conversations as almost user interviews, and so on. And if they're not buying your pitch, then they're probably not buying your product. Well said. And if you're not learning. If you're not winning, you better be learning, right? So I like the idea of keeping your ears open and learning what you're going to do for fine tuning for the next round or the next set of interviews or proposals going out. And it is very hard. And just when you think you're done, it starts all over again, right? So I know it's the bane of your existence. You just want to kind of keep your head down and build something really interesting and cool. And you've got to just keep going out there for money, or you got to monetize it, right? Sometimes it's easy to build a product if it's free. It's harder to build a product that users are going to pay for. So,
absolutely. And that's really cool. Some interesting backers, and a great story there. Now, one of the other things I like to kind of research with various guests is, what does your team look like? Is it global? Is it more centralized? What does it look like?
No, it's completely global. Everybody's remote. We have people all over the world, from Asia to South America. Quite a few in Europe. We've got people in North America as well. All over the world. Predominantly engineering. The team is mostly made up of kind of like product design engineering, and so on. As you can tell from the product that we're building and so on. But distributed all over the world. We do a lot of kind of like async communication, but everybody works from home. And that was kind of normal for us. Like, we were working at home from the Maker days as well. Everyone was remote in the Maker team. Back then, there was a couple of like satellite offices like around the world where people were just more than anything just lived in the same place. But yeah, so we've a lot of us, particularly those that have been in work, come from Maker from back then, used to working remotely for a long time now.
Yeah, no big surprise here. No big surprise. It's fun. It's interesting. And it's definitely dynamic. Is it nice to sit with people? Yeah, of course. But people are adapting, and they're just doing very, very well in these environments, especially, the development community. And I think they have been for a very long time, even before Web3. So really cool. Indeed. I always love to hear about the kind of the global influence and where people pull resources and talent in from. And as we wrap up a little bit here, Chris, one of the things I always like to kind of end on is, Chris, what are you excited for in 2024? Like, in Q4 of 2024 and going into 2025, right? Because I'll end it at the beginning of 2025 because things move so damn fast. What are you excited for?
Yeah, so I think internally at Summerfy, like I said, I alluded to, we're releasing the new Summer protocol at the start of 2025. So like that is keeping us incredibly busy at the moment internally, and so on, that we're working really hard on that. Outside of Summerfy, but still in DeFi, there's a number of like kind of protocols coming out this year as well. We've got like Euler V2s, like bringing out their new protocol, which looks really awesome. Super excited to see where some of the newer protocols like Morpho and so continue to go. This year, I think we've got Liquidity maybe later on in the year at some point as well, or in the summer, I'm not quite sure. But yeah, like there's some really awesome kind of like new protocols and new things happen in DeFi in particular all the time, and so fast. So like 1 year feels like 5, maybe 10 at times in the speed of development and so on we see. So yeah, I'm actually just looking forward to getting towards the end of the year and seeing what's come out, or even just announced, and so on in that space.
Yeah, and now we have common theme that's happening now with asset management tools is real world assets, tokenizing real world assets. Really exciting. And that's really going to flip DeFi on its head and really start to make people think differently about what investments mean. What does collateral mean? I'm starting a business. It could be made easier. You could bolster your collateral in various ways. So really exciting. I mean, there's never a dull moment in Web3, and especially DeFi Web3 for sure. So, Chris, where can our viewers and listeners reach you, learn more about Summerfy, and kind of get involved, whether they're a developer or, an end user?
Yeah, so I think the easier thing is just to head to our website, literally Summer.Fi. From there, you'll find the links at the bottom to like our Twitter or X and Discords and so on. If you want to reach out to the team, Discord is definitely the best place. I think the link is chat.summer.fi, but the best place is just head to Summer.Fi. You'll find the Discord links and so on at the bottom there. Click those, join the server, and say hello. Our community manager, Javier, is generally around there every single day. So yeah, like he'll point you in the right place if you need anything. But yeah, check out the website, check out that app. Like I said, if you open a position, you earn these raise, and so on now. And yeah, stay tuned for more updates on that and the protocol coming later this year.
Excellent. Yes. And for our listeners and viewers, Summer.Fi, Chris Bradbury, thank you so much. Very exciting. We look forward to staying up to date with your product and seeing how it matures and grows and becomes a huge success. So thank you.
Rich, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.